Hi, I'm Melissa, and this is the Book Break. And today I'm talking to an author with a paranormal fantasy romance, super fun book, and his name is Anthony Dobranski. Come on in, Anthony.
Hi, thank you for having me, Melissa. Great to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about your book because your book is really unique to other books that I've read because you really hit. So you've got paranormal, you've got fantasy, you've got romance. So the demon in business class. Now, I would love if you could give us a summary of your book because it's so fun.
Thank you for asking. The Demon in Business Class, it's a paranormal romance that's pretending to be a corporate thriller. It's the story of two people. One is a woman named Zerabeth who gets early on a fantastic corporate perk, a demon or a demonic power that lets her speak all languages. And she is basically sent to work for a shady business person on what turns out to be a way to start the next global war. Meanwhile, another fellow, Gabriel, finds out to his chagrin that he is a psychic and winds up working for someone who finally wants to stop this same effort. So each of them falls down a different rabbit hole, finds the world is very different than what they thought. And then one night in a hotel bar in Scotland, they meet each other and everything goes pear-shaped for both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about your book is you get an insight into this paranormal world that I haven't quite been seeing this before in other books. So Zerabeth, she reads tarot cards as a part of her world and understanding maybe the witchcraft and the demon, but you actually created some tarot cards specifically for this book. And I thought these were super interesting because for those that are familiar with tarot cards, you can see that these ones are different. Can you tell us a little bit more about the tarot cards?
Sure. It began in the book really as just a literary device. I wanted to give her, something supernatural, something foretelling that would let her kind of go on her quest. But, she can't go hike a mountain to meet the guru. She's got a plane to catch. The tarot cards fit that, except they didn't really fit her. Tarot cards, or at least the traditional kind, they're very gender imbalanced. They're very old school. There's no way that she's going to know what some of these things are. So I found myself adapting them to the corporate world, first kind of just simply, but it became a real thing. And I knew that it became a real thing when people, when I would talk about the book, I would be at book signings or literary festivals or Comic-Cons, and people would say, so what is that deck? Where do I get it? And after a while, I thought, well, maybe I should work on that. So I actually created the deck after I created the concept. I worked with a fantastic artist named Jamin Hoyle, who he's a professor of commercial art at Virginia Commonwealth University. He mainly does advertising, but he likes to dabble in fine art projects. And we worked together for probably 9 months. And it was kind of a phenomenal process for me because I couldn't use really any words. I had to come up with picture concepts and work it out. The deck is for sale. It's called Business Class Tarot, and it's a companion to the novel that it tells the same ideas, trying to work these fantastical or mystical elements in the modern world, but in a different way. So it was a pretty fun project to do.
Yeah. Well, and another fun thing that I thought about your book, or a unique thing, is that you have what Zerabeth has. She calls it her polyglot. It's her demon.
It's a demon.
Her demon actually gives her the ability to speak any language. And I actually listened to the audiobook of your book, and your narrator, I am blown away by your narrator because I'm like, does she have a polyglot? Because her accents are so good and she does a lot of them. Tell me a little bit more about your narrator.
My narrator, Laura Peterson, she worked so hard on this. I was really gratified to have her take the role because, it's a book with like 78 different long speaking parts, and many of them are international accents, and sometimes multiple international characters. Like I'll have 3 different Hong Kong Chinese or 3 different Russians in one scene, along with 2 Americans, and she has to find a way to make each of those distinctive, flip between them all. It's really an incredible job that she did. She does Hungarian, Italian, different British, different Russian, different Chinese, She does a phenomenal Haitian for one scene later in the book that still gives me chills because it's a supernatural entity, and she
Oh
finds
yeah.
the perfect voice for that being. The whole thing, I mean, she worked so hard, and really I had very little input on it, which was just, wonderful. That, occasionally I would listen to proof and mention a couple of minor details, but no, it was her effort. And Laura Peterson, phenomenal narrator. I'm so proud to have worked with her.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, so you mentioned the part about when she had to do the Haitian um, character. I would remember listening to that and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so creepy. But I mean, for those people that love the paranormal, like they're gonna love that scene because it's totally there. I was really interested to hear about, you had your characters going all over the world, and
Mhm.
as a part of that, your characters, I mean, they had to really know the area. So how did you get into knowing all of these different areas? Have you also traveled around the world?
I have also traveled around the world. In a previous life, before I started writing, I worked in the early internet industry. I worked for America Online, and I would open international offices for them. So I worked in Hamburg, Paris, London, Tokyo, Sydney, and Hong Kong for long stints. And I also I studied in Paris when I was in college, and I traveled around Italy and Spain. When I was in Hong Kong and in Japan, I would travel in other places in Asia. So these are places that I all know to some degree. There's only two places in the book that I've actually never been, and I'm not going to tell you which they are because, but everything else, it's some place that I've been and some place that I want to evoke. And at the same time, though, then since I changed the countries every chapter, I couldn't like go into huge detail. I kind of had to sketch them really quickly and really finely. So that was a real challenge that was fun to me, constantly finding a way to evoke a different place, but not go into like, long places, because, got to keep the pace going, got to get you through the plot. So that was a fun balance. But yeah, if you want a big travel, since if you're stuck at home, as we all are in the pandemic, I can give you a world tour in one book.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I really liked about your writing is you're very descriptive. And so I think it really makes the reader feel like you're there and feel like you know exactly what's going on. And Gabriel in the book, part of his psychic abilities were that he has an incredible sense of smell.
Mhm.
And I seriously kept thinking to myself, have you had to sit down and actually think about every single thing you smell? Because I've never done that before. So when I was reading Gabriel, I thought, how did you even think of all these things?
The smelling, yeah, it was definitely an act of imagination, and I had to play with it. But when you go to other places, particularly foreign places, you do usually meet a different everything, and that includes smell. Smell's a very evocative sense, and it's one that I don't think really gets enough emphasis. I mean, you can't do it at all in a movie, and I think that a lot of writers tend to skew towards the visual because, again, they can describe it. So I felt it was fun to play with. Also, it's a very intimate and uncomfortable sense. People worry about, do I smell okay? There's a whole
Yeah.
antiperspirant industry. So it gave me a chance to kind of reach past the usual gloss and get to something a little more vital, a little more raw, and those were all good ways to play with it. So yeah, it was certainly something I had to think through, and just the culture of it. Like, how do you describe smells? There's a whole, like there's perfumes, but then what do you say about them exactly? There's no real vocabulary we have for it. So it was a lot of fun to play with that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've mentioned before, this is a romance, and it's a pretty steamy romance. So for the parents out there that are going to listen to this book, which I hope you listen to it as well, you might want to listen to it on earbuds because it gets a little steamy in parts. But you know what? It's totally a part of the book and really involved in the characters, and it makes sense that these characters are going to have these kinds of relationships. So I think that it's a really good book for those to listen to, but also have a physical book, especially because then you can look at the tarot cards.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for saying both about the audiobook, which I love. I'm such a big fan of Laura's performance. But yeah, the print edition, I worked hard to make it, a good looking thing. It has a few illustrations from the tarot. So yeah, I think people will be satisfied either way. And to your point about the steaminess, it is a 10 p.m. show, not an 8 p.m. show for sure. But I thank you for saying that it's part of who the characters are and that it follows naturally for their frustrations and their own ways of being, because I definitely wanted it to be raw and human and feel like real people, real adult people going through this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been so great talking with you today. Thank you for joining me, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I had a great time talking to you about the Demon in Business class. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. We'll see you next time.